Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Unscrabble the Puzzle 2021. We are happy to have all of you here with us on this lovely Sunday afternoon. And I'm looking forward to a time of learning and discussion and sharing as well. Yeah, the topic of this year's Unscrabble the Puzzle is a focus on the COVID-19 mental health impact on autistic individuals. With us today, we have two esteemed guest speakers, Tan Cheng Yi and Dr. Amar Singh, who will be sharing their perspectives, one from a more educational perspective about navigating the transitions of remote and on-site schooling for children with special education needs, and another from the medical perspective of the impact of social isolation as well as the mental health impact on autistic individuals as well as their families. My name is Prakash and I will be your moderator this afternoon. Just some Zoom housekeeping. Please do keep your microphone muted and your video camera off until we reach the panel discussion session. The chat box is available for any comments or questions you might have, whether you are joining us on Zoom here or on our Facebook Live. We will be collating and collecting these comments and questions, and we will be using it during our panel discussion session. So run through of today's agenda. After this quick welcome, passing the time, we will be hearing from Ms. Tan Cheng Yi. After that, we will hear from Dr. Amar Singh. And then at 3:15 p.m., we hope to start the panel discussion where we will have your questions and get the answers and hear from our esteemed speakers and have our discussions as well. And we aim to end by 3:45 this afternoon. Just a quick introduction of Oasis Place. As your host, we are Malaysia's largest transdisciplinary intervention center. We offer assessments, therapy services on-site at our center, off-site at schools, in homes, and as well online through the platform Oasis Place Connect. Yeah. Helping people learn and grow is at the heart of everything that we do. Yeah. We try our best to support our clients through transitions through the different stages of their life and our aim to achieve the best quality of life. And these goals are underpinned by aspirations, the 3 Rs: restore, refresh, and relationship. Some of the services that we provide, both physically and virtually, are psychological services, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, music therapy, as well as continuing learning, so events and programs such as this. Just want to highlight our website, oasisplace.com.my. We have recently revamped our website to provide more resources, whether you're a parent or caregiver, whether you are somebody on the autism spectrum or have a learning difference, for health professionals, educators, and employers as well. We do try to compile resources and information on our website, but we do have a list of free screening tools as well that you can go and have a look at. We try to compile some of the more evidence-based ones on the website, so it's an easy spot and an easy space for parents, teachers to kind of reference. Without further ado, I am going to invite Dr. Choi Sukwen, who is the founder and mother of Oasis Place, to share a few words.
Prakash, thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome all in Zoom and in FB live stream. Unscrabble Puzzle 2021 is actually our 7th occasion. Oasis Place team we gather annually primarily with the medical and healthcare professionals to have interaction on topics relating to autism and neurodevelopmental learning issues. Originally an intimate gathering of about 30 to 40 individuals, it is now made more accessible to the larger audience with online delivery. Today we have about 130 registered participants on Zoom alone, and amongst us are participants from the medical and healthcare sector, educators, and we are very happy to have parents and stakeholders. We are very pleased to have expanded the audience, and thanks to our guest speakers for enabling that. In the webinar topics chosen today, we look forward to hearing from two specialists, also highly sought after speakers on two what I consider very pertinent and urgent issues, school transitions and mental health, push to the forefront in current COVID-19 pandemic setting. Personally and professionally, these areas are also in the tenets of Oasis Place's intervention pillars of emotional regulation, social communication, independent life skills, and advocacy. The COVID-19 crisis has affected education sector hard. We are now close to, I think, 19 months into the pandemic. The world's and Malaysian students are still affected by partial or full school closures, giving all stakeholders huge concerns on the impact on education and health to typical students and for us, the differently able learners. To give context to the size of the potential problems arising, UNESCO has a global monitoring of duration of school closures, and it charts Malaysia at plus 41 weeks in its highest band category. Malaysia specifically has had a total of 52 weeks closure. Our speaker, Tan Ching Yi was one of the pioneering participants and speakers since Unscrabble Puzzle 2015. I'm really looking forward to Ching Yi's presentation on navigating school transitions. While mental health is now a more frequently discussed and presented topic affecting really all walks of lives, I look forward to Dr. Amar's golden nuggets of the impact on autistic individuals and families, where individuals with autism are generally already at increased risk for mental health conditions. What more now with added assaults because of the pandemic. My personal thanks again to our guest speakers, Ching Yi and Dr. Amar Singh, giving us their Sunday time to share their insights in their respective areas. Let's get on to hearing them. Thank you all for joining and participating. Thank you, Prakash.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Okay, so as Dr. Choi mentioned, I think we're all looking forward to hearing from our speakers for today. Let me just introduce Cheng Yi. She's a chartered educational psychologist who has worked in the UK for 10 years and is also back here in Malaysia for 10 years. She's one of the original team members who was starting Oasis Place back in 2014 and served as the head of psychology for 5 years, where she was a mentor and is still a mentor for myself. She's now an educational psychologist, independent educational psychologist working out of Sumanjaya Medical Center. And she's also the supervisor for Child Mental Health Helpline Buddy Bear. Cheng Yi is very passionate about her work with children and adolescents and focuses on their learning and development. She's also a mother of 3 girls. Cheng Yi, over to you.
Thanks, Prakash. Yeah, very privileged to be with all of you. This is also, this topic is also very much in my heart because I've got 3 children, 3 school-going children. I'm going to start by providing some context and setting some limits to my half-an-hour talk, because this scope is potentially very large and I won't be able to go into specific details. Yeah, but today we're talking about special needs and autism. Call it what you like, differently able, learning challenge, atypical development. I would just use special needs if it's okay for simplicity. It does not discriminate race, gender, and social economic status. And I think earlier we've heard that Malaysia has been in more than 1 year of closure, and the learning loss has been one of the longest in the world. So yesterday I was in a room full of parents and I was just asking the status of their children's schooling, and the answer was so varied. Some people have chosen to remain online. Other schools have just started and then about to stop. Still other schools, are about to start. Parents have got the choice whether they want to go online or to send their children to school or follow the hybrid system. So there's such jarring differences in our experiences, our children's experiences. And this is where we are as a nation as we exit the pandemic. So what impact does this long lockdown and uncertain recovery have on our children and their families? I think there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution approach to this transition. So the parents, the questions that the parents are asking are like, how do I send my child back to school? How do I help them to catch up? And do I let them stay back 1 year? Do I hold them back? Or do I even know, how do I even know if they have fallen behind? So these are not easy answers. And the reasons are multifaceted. They involve financial decision, a child's needs, the family dynamics, and it's all embedded within the larger framework of public health and schools. So let's just look at special needs to begin with. Yeah, so first of all, special needs and autism fall on a very wide spectrum. Every child has its unique strengths and challenges. And when we talk about children, we are covering a developmental period from infanthood to adolescence. And for special needs children, the growing up journey is usually longer. So I should think that we need to be thinking about lifelong transitions as well. Secondly, I think we need to be looking at the child's needs from a biological, social, ecological model, understanding the challenges from the individual families' lived-in experiences, as well as the wider context of the society around the child. So here we see the child as an individual we want to help. And there are many individual factors that we need to take into consideration: the family context, sibling, parental stress, what school that they go to. Beyond that, is the social network around them, their school, health, education system, political system, and then the wider cultural factors that influence decision-making, decisions that are made on their behalf. Of course, it is bi-directional as well. The child is also an agent that can influence the environment around him or her. So families of special needs children are often under a lot of stress because of the challenges that the child brings. So there are no simple solutions, and every individual family need to navigate this transition to make it work for them. So COVID-19 has placed extra burdens on parents with special needs. What is it about special needs that make it more challenging? So children with special needs, they thrive on repetition and sameness. They need time to adjust and bond with teachers and peers. Familiarity and predictability are things that help them, to anticipate what is going on and to give them a sense of control. And unpredictability breeds anxiety. Second, they thrive on consistency and structure. There has been a serial opening and closing of schools, and this has been very unsettling, right? Many of our special needs children take time to respond to new routines and expectations. They need personalized learning. So remote learning removes a lot of that because it's hard to deliver lessons online, much less to personalize it for a few individuals. Children with special needs have difficulty with comprehension. So context is very important. You lose them when you give them instructions without the context. They learn by doing. They need to see, to listen, and to feel at the same time to understand. So teachers are usually there to help them by modeling and giving hand-to-hand prompts, monitoring, and providing step-by-step instructions. These are not easily available to support comprehension when they are done remotely. They have a need for movement and sensory regulation. So when children are expected to stare at screens for long periods of time without the usual walking from class to class, going for recess, talking with their friends in between, and having physical education, it is very restrictive. It is stressful for them to hold it all in. It interferes with the ability to attend and to focus. So parents are reporting more irritability and meltdowns in the pandemic. They also have difficulty with impulse control and emotional regulation. So it's doubly difficult for them to resist the temptation not to screen hop, especially when they're finding it that they're not rewarded, right? It is more rewarding to play games and watch their favorite YouTube. Interestingly, I'm just wondering how many of us are actually doing more than one thing at the same time. I catch myself doing that quite a lot online. So I think sometimes we are a bit unfair when we expect so much from our children. So along with this, they also have difficulties with communication. So even if they're feeling out of sorts, they may not know how to tell you what they're feeling. And so they expect the adults to anticipate their needs. They don't think about telling you how they're feeling or how to advocate for their own needs. And some of them are also less able to self-reflect. So if you aren't able to self-reflect because maybe, with the rigidity and, not being able to, compare yourself to others and what's happening, realize what's happening around you, they don't make the necessary adaptations to the environment like we do. So it's harder for them to adjust to the change that they're experiencing. But this is not always the case, right? So on the flip side of what I've shared, there are some special needs traits that actually work well for some families. So you take, for instance, the need for calmness. The home offers a safe and quiet environment from noise and crowds. Secondly, they are juggling far less activities than normal. They don't have to wake up early and to rush to get to school and attend many after-school activities. Third, many schools have had to be selective on the subjects that are being offered online. So they have cut down on the learning time. They only have 2 to 3 lessons a day. And so they have a slower pace of delivery. So at the end of the day, parents really need to navigate the situation by knowing their child while juggling the needs of the families. And so how do we go about making this decision? So let me share a story from a family that I work with. This is a case where online learning is ineffective, so forget about it. And this is what a 9-year-old client's father did. Because he was working from home, plus his flexibility in his work schedule, it has allowed him to observe his son. He noticed that his son was really lost during the PDPR learning, the remote learning, and he was not keeping up at all with his teacher's instructions. On top of that, he noticed he was barely able to spell and write. So in the past, the teachers have actually mentioned, that there are some challenges, they're concerned, but he never really had a chance to see it for himself until the lockdown. So after sharing his concerns with his pediatrician, he was referred for an assessment. And after seeing him for 2 sessions, I realized he's got a specific learning disorder with a very slow processing speed. So he needed a lot more time than others to process new and unfamiliar information. And he needed more visuals, which the online learning was not providing. So his father did a very brave thing by deciding to forego all the online learning because it wasn't any benefit for him. Instead, he took on the coaching himself and he had employed some personalized tutor to the house. So he really made good use of the time and he just focused on the 3 R's, which is what he needed, the reading, the writing, and arithmetic. And he saw significant gains. So how do we advise parents on making choices about online and in-person schooling? I think we can ask these few questions. What is the level of your child's special educational needs? What resources or supports can you provide at home? And what are the things that your child is missing, which you alone cannot provide? Okay, so knowing your child's special needs is very important. Like in the case that I've just shared, the child had mainly a learning issue, and so he was able to benefit from his father's intervention from home, yeah, for the duration of the pandemic. Yeah. But some other children have highly complex needs. They need much more specialized provision. Okay, in the case of case study 2, when not going to school becomes harmful. So this is an 11-year-old female with intellectual disability. She has epilepsy and comorbid ADHD. And this family has tried many interventions, and the interventions has been very choppy, start and stop, and they haven't had a lot of success. Parents also are a little bit overprotective and permissive. And you can understand why, given her background. So she hasn't been going to school at all, and remote learning has also been non-existent. So the result is that she's regressing to childish and oppositional behaviors. So the father continues to be quite reluctant to send her to school because he's worried about her catching COVID. So in this situation, parents' fear need to be managed, and keeping the child home can actually be a little bit more harmful from her developmental perspective. So this is a child that can really benefit from expertise from a multidisciplinary team. And so letting her attend school and intervention services in a managed way would actually be something that she needs. So just by using these simple questions, I think we really need to know the child in order to make that judgment, right? So what is the level of your child's special educational needs? What resources or supports can you provide? What are the things that your child is missing which you alone cannot provide? So in a case where it's mild and easily identified, and you can adequately provide the support, and the learning environment is conducive, and you can actually capitalize on the slower pace of learning, yeah, it might not be so bad to stay at home and do the necessary. But in other cases where it is more complex, and the support that you provide is not helping the child to thrive, and there are multiple needs that are unmet, then you really should be reaching out to services beyond the home. So this case really highlights, isn't it, the need for us to individualize the support that we give to the families that we work with. So COVID has actually been very unfair to parents because they've had the need to choose between their child's development and the health, right, and safety of their families. And children under 12 have not been vaccinated. So this is I pose a real danger for many families. So what parents need to know is that if they're not going back to school or society, then they might be missing out on incidental learning of many soft skills. And what am I talking about? So things like time management, self-care, looking after their belongings, social skills, teamwork, and self-control are the things that we need to try and provide and find different ways to let them have these skills if they're not going to be going back to school. There's been some research looking at how children with autism have fared during the pandemic. So I don't know what people think. Is there such a thing as natural quarantiners, as some have thought? Because children with autism tend to be a little bit anxious in a social setting. So do all welcome isolation? So there has been some research that has found that they have managed quarantine better than expected. Perhaps being in a more relaxed environment, remove all the everyday pressures. And even some research that has found in children and even adults, there are no changes in stress and mental health status. But there are also research that has found other contrasting findings, right? One group of researchers studied these Australian autistic people I'm changing my language here a little bit because I realized that people with autism is how I used to say it. Nowadays, advocate for the autism to come first when describing them. So a group of autistic people, okay, between the ages of 12 and 18 years. And they've given us a more balanced picture. So you can see over here that the three different themes from what they're reporting, there is definitely a release from conventional social challenges, maybe at the beginning of the pandemic, right? And then there's a second theme of a deep sense of social loss. And then there's even the deterioration of mental health. Yeah, so that's a nice balanced view from recent research. So it's again, very individualized. So I just want to say that if you decide to not send your children back to school again, because I find a lot of parents are making that decision, do ensure they still have opportunities for social interactions, even if the interactions are incidental. So meaning incidental social interactions will be things like seeing people, right? Going outside and interacting with people, passing them by, being able to observe what people do in their everyday lives. And you decide not to send your child back to school, or if you do decide to send your child back to school, here are some things that can ease the transition. I mean, start with yourself, right? It's important that we manage our own anxiety because it can be contagious. And we can very easily convey our anxiety by our attitude or tone of voice alone. Start by understanding our own triggers and learn to deal with them. Be aware of specific procedures that the schools are giving. And communicate your frustration to another adult, not when your child is around. Some of your children may be sleeping late and waking up late, so you really need to adjust and re-establish the sleeping and waking routine. You need to introduce the new routines and expectations visually, preparing them for all the different SOPs. So one way is actually to use a social story. Of course, the social story has to be personalized to the child, and you're providing information. Actually, I do want to share this social story. Maybe I'll just click on it very quickly. I'm mindful of time, and this is done by the Downs Association. It is very long, but you can see what I mean. It's written in a very simplistic way for the child's needs, and it's very, very visual. And it provides, it addresses the emotions. So it prepares the child for what is to be expected, and it helps them to self-regulate. Okay, so it goes down and it talks a lot about things that will change, like the playground closing, and different things like the washing hands SOPs, etc. and etc. Of course, this one is very long. Again, as I say, it has to be personalized for the child, but I think you get the idea. Okay, just going back there. So just try and give me a moment to get back to my PowerPoint. Do apologize. Try to get my PowerPoint back up again. Yeah. Okay, so tips for easing into a transition continues. Things like hybrid schooling. Remember to provide calendar to mark, color mark the days they're going back to school. So this is an idea that you can do very easily for your children. And you may want to have different calendars if you have more than one child. Other things like increasing familiarity, meeting with the teachers first, making a visit to the school, re-establishing connections with their peers. Maybe what you want to do is to getting them used to social interactions, organizing a play date maybe outside the house, getting them used to wearing a mask when they interact, and how they can actually connect without touching each other. And I think it's really important that we be available and not judgmental. So making that time to actually listen, observe what our children are going through and validating their feelings. When we are stressed and our children are feeling stressed, it's very easy for families to clash. Okay, so make that time. Reach out for external supports. This is the time where we don't need to be hak hei, you know, as we say in Chinese, a paiseh. Maybe your neighbors can pop over to look after your child for half an hour while you bring the other children to school, because now they are no longer in sync. So simple things like that, you know, getting professional help, yeah, and getting somebody to assess your child to see where they're at. Talking over your concerns with your pediatrician, the school psychologist or the counselor. And most importantly, I think you can involve your children in the decision making. You know, in very young children also can tell us what they really, really want. I was looking at this group of researchers that use play, narrative play therapy to find out from children their experiences of COVID-19. And the play therapy has been able, they've been able to curate it and subjected it to a thematic analysis. And what they have come up with is children as young as 2 to 4 years old have been able to communicate that they want to regain their daily life routines. They want to be with their friends. They want to have more playtime and be outdoors. And they want authentic information. You know, they don't want to be sheltered from the truth, but maybe they wanted to know what is happening as well out there. So finally, I wanted to share what we've learned from COVID-19 about the directions that we need to take for special needs children. I think as a nation, we've put a lot of emphasis on schools, like teachers, and service providers, like therapists, to meet the needs of our special needs children. And the lockdown has taught us that people need to empower the families. They need to equip the parents within their own homes of how to deal with things within their own context. It has to be personalized and individualized for the family. So it's about parenting special needs. So there is a need for the training of allied health professionals to visit parents at home, work with partnership, right, with parents, and widening the services provision to include parenting programs. Secondly, I think we really need to look how we do assessments. We no longer rely on face-to-face assessments only. And we need to develop more accessible and reliable ways of providing diagnosis for children with special needs so that diagnosis is not delayed. So maybe even developing protocols that can send activities home to their parents to do with their children, and then they could video it and send it back for analysis. So it's working in partnership with parents and getting them involved from the get-go. So we're not only talking about one-time assessments because the developmental nature of special needs, we need to have continuous follow-ups because children change from time to time. So they ought to have regular services that adapt to their growing needs. So let me share my final case. This is a case of discontinued services. This is a 15-year-old who was diagnosed with being atypical and having ADHD when he was in preschool. So after a period of occupational therapy, his parents stopped intervention because they found a school, a home school that would accommodate his needs. And everything was going well with his mom's very intensive support, home and school. And finally, in the pandemic, he could not cope because of the big change, and he had huge meltdowns, was depressed, and even had suicidal ideation. So the parents took him to see a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and he was given some medication to manage his depression and his anxieties. And I saw him for treatment and clarification of diagnosis. So this child actually have autism, and the traits were not so obvious until the stresses were over and beyond his coping capabilities, and also his family and his parents' coping capabilities. And by getting in touch with his teachers and sharing with them his needs, they have been able to provide some physical activities, a range from physical activities for him. And also when he came back to school during the transition, they provided an individualized tutor to help him ease into the transition. and parents needed quite a bit of counseling to also understand the autism aspect of the child, because all this while they thought that, you know, maybe he just has ADHD. So it's coming to terms with it. So this case highlights the need for a seamless, continuous, multidisciplinary service that does not break down during the pandemic. So finally, I think there is a huge disparity in children's progress, and there's a call for a need for a more universal, right, design for learning. So what does a universal design for learning look like? It utilizes flexible ways to engage with children, allowing more personalized expression according to the child's preferred way of learning. For example, it allows children to take subjects, you know, that are important, and being able to forego things that are not necessary. And learning can spread over a longer period of time, and the child can use more than one way of showing their understanding. So instead of just using the traditional paper pencil approach, you know, they could make a YouTube video, which lots of our kids are very good at these days, creating a model to show what they can do, or just doing an oral report. Yeah, so these are more flexible ways that can capture a child's needs and can fit into many more. It's about making the learning more inclusive and more accessible for children with varying needs. Yeah, so I've come to my end of my talk. I don't know whether I've gone over time, but I hope that I think the main thing that I really wanted to share today was the fact that, you know, we really need to understand our children, know our children, and professionals. This is where we can help as well by asking those pertinent questions about whether families are coping and whether they are actually getting the services that they need, and channeling them on to the right places. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Amar Singh, who is going to be talking to us about social isolation and the mental health of autistic individuals as well as their families. Just a brief introduction of Dr. Amar. He's a consultant pediatrician who served the Malaysian Health Service for 35 years, where he led regional pediatric and research departments. He's interested in disadvantaged and marginalized children, especially the indigenous people, the community, disability, as well as family self-help groups. He helped to revise child health services and introduce national programs for children, and is an active child advocate. He is the recipient of the Outstanding Asian Pediatrician Award 2012 and Senior Advocacy Award 2016, and has established NGOs as well as family support groups. Can we now pass the time over to Dr. Amar?
Thank you very much, Prakash, for the kind introduction. Prakash is someone I've known since he was young, or rather known when he was young. His mother and I were in the same medical school together. And thank you to Sokwen for this kind invitation. To Melissa, Malati, and Esther who in the background, doing things. I'm delighted to be here with Cheng Yi to talk. Normally, I would reject such an invitation, not because of the large number of talks that I do, but I seldom want to speak on behalf of an autistic person, using the terminology that Cheng Yi talked about just now. I would prefer them talking, and I have a number of options talking about the impact of COVID with people with disability. And I've actually asked that we should get parents and other people who have disabilities to talk. The reason I've accepted this is not just because of the many decades of working with people with disability, but also in this last 2 years, I've immersed myself in supporting people who have disabilities, lots of parents, done a lot of interaction with people. And so I'm prepared to share a little bit from that. Allow me to get my screen going if I can. Give me a second. All these computer things have a life of their own, I think, quite often. All right, there's my screen. All right, let me share that. Can see that? Thank you very much. All right. So I've been asked to talk about, socialization, mental health for not just the autistic individual, but also their families. And there were these two questions that were posed to me. How did autistic people experience and the increase in socialization during the initial lockdowns, and of course the prolonged lockdown? What was their mental health impact of the lockdown? Okay, so I'm going to share some insights, some struggles, and some ways that people coped. Okay, I want to say that we all have struggled. If you have not struggled, I was surprised one of the research that Cheng Yi showed that there was no impact on people. I think if any of you have not been impacted by COVID emotionally, psychologically, not been a bit depressed or upset, then I think you're a very, very unique person, probably the most unique person on the planet. Suicide is doubled. This is 4 years, this is 2 years data. Suicide in the country is doubled, especially in younger people and in women in particular. And so it's not confined to people with autism or the disabled. Everybody on the planet has had mental health issues to some degree, mild or severe. I often say what is personal is often universal. The experiences that you experience, quite often, many people in the world also experience. I did this opinion poll last year in October when I was doing a parent group discussion, telling parents, not just those who are disabled, but everyone about how to cope. And this was the parents' responses. 80+% said, I'm just barely keeping it together. I think I can last this crisis, but I take a lot of effort. And that was the general feel. I doubt it's changed very much. And I asked about their children, and here their response to children. 80% of the children they felt were in this situation. I'm very worried about my child's mental, emotional health. My children seem to be struggling to cope in the pandemic. I think my children are just coping and they require much support. And this was a general opinion of most parents. And I think we all are still somewhere there, struggling, coping, wishing for a miracle, as my wife said this morning, a miracle to end this pandemic today rather than see it drag another 2 or 3 years. So what I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to first give you my data sources, my method, where did I get my sources of information to describe what's happening. Then I'm going to talk about how families were affected, generally with people with disability. Then talk about social isolation impact on autistic people and their families, the impact of lockdown on the mental health of autistic families, and then what we can do about it. Not just the people with autism or the families, but the rest of us to support as well. And here's my methods. For the purpose of this talk, I did face-to-face interviews. Invited parents and other individuals I knew with autism who could schedule a discussion with me. Plus, I sent out a narrative questionnaire to some who could not and asked them to give me an account. I did quite a bit of that because I wanted to saturate. There's something in statistics where you saturate teams, like what was shown by Cheng Yi earlier. I also targeted parents that I knew who were supporting other parents because I wanted them to amplify the experiences of other parents who I did not know and may speak to me. So whenever you see AMA 2021, then you know that's coming from this set of interviews and questions. I've also in the last 2 years been listening and supporting people on the online National Family Support Group for Special Needs and also Harapan OKU. And I have opinions and ideas from there. There have been expressions in the media of challenges people with autism and others have faced, and I will share 1 or 2 ideas from there. I wrote a large paper for the National Early Childhood Intervention with Lightin, talking about the future of early intervention services in Malaysia, and a sizable proportion of the document deals with COVID and the impact of COVID on families and on services. And I'm going to use some sections of that to share with you because we did a lot of work to write this particular document. I'm involved in an ongoing study with disability activists looking at, this is funded by UNESCO, looking at the situation of people with disability in the pandemic and their access to ICT. But inside here, there is data from people with autism that I'm going to share with you. Finally, I supplemented by reading overseas literature. They're more published than we are, and that was useful. There's some social bias here. I'm definitely dealing with the middle class or the upper middle class, okay, in my conversations and discussions. So that is a limitation you should hear here. Secondly, I had more parents having chats with me and more opinions from families than from adult people with autism. And finally, I will not discuss with you those who have lost families. That's a particular, very, very serious group. If any autistic child or adult has lost a family, it's extremely difficult. And that's a far difficult challenge than what I'm going to talk here. I've got 2 resources for you, and there's a bit link. I hope that the team will post this in your chat box or in FB for you. There's also a QR code you can scan right now. I'm going to share with you the full document I wrote for the NACIC with Lightin. It's more than 40 pages worth reading. It charts the future of where we see it's not just going to apply to EIP, it's going to apply to all services for the disabled and perhaps even for special education services. The second is something I wrote late last year when I did a session on how to support parents and children with disability. It's not very long, it's 2-3 pages long, talking about some tips on how to do it. And I'll share some of this at the end on how we can cope. So those are available to you. Okay. I like this old Malay saying, berat mata memandang, berat lagi bahu memikul, which actually says, I'm not qualified to speak because we don't really understand what people go through unless we go through it ourselves, which is very true. Huh? And I was reminded during the interviews by some parents. One described a young couple who have a 4-year-old child with autism, and both parents lost their job because of COVID. Life became very stressful. They struggled to pay the rent of the place they were staying. They lost all their therapy for the child. The child had excessive meltdown tantrums, and the mother became suicidal. And this is something that we're not going to see very much in the middle class, upper middle class, who have access to more resources. Fortunately, this mother posted some things on social media that someone spotted suggesting that she was suicidal. This particular parent talked to me. They reached out, managed to rescue this family. But I wonder how many we have not rescued who have actually committed suicide, who sometimes may also end their child's life as they end their own life. So recognize that we are scratching the surface of what we're talking about. So the resources available to a family often will determine the outcome in coping, and that's sad. Okay. Of course, the combination capacity and functional level, as Cheng Yi talked about, the child also determines outcome. So no single method or approach works. It's very family-based. Okay. So let's talk about what you came to hear about, the effect on families, social isolation impact, and mental health. Let's talk about impact on families and disability. In general, this comes from a document I wrote with Lightin, and we recognize from a lot of data and information from our partners offering services that there has been hard hit. Everybody's been hard hit. We've lost our services. Now, if you're a child without a disability and you don't go to school, it's not great. But there are many other ways of coping. But if you're a child who's got autism or some other disability and you lost your support services, then you lost your lifeline. And quite often children lose progress. And lots of parents have reported regression in their children because they lost their EIP, they lost their schooling, they lost their therapists. Parents reported a loss of breathing space because parents actually value children going out of the home to centers because that's when they get a bit of breathing from their breathing space, and they lost that. We also notice a very large number of children who have a later diagnosis, later therapy. We often depend on teachers to pick up children with problems, and that is lost completely. Or kindergartens, or even other individuals. We lost all of that. And also harder to go to the hospital now because you're worried about COVID. So there's going to be a huge backlog of children who actually didn't even get EIP, didn't get the kindy inclusion, and going to present to us later with poorer outcomes. Isolated at home, it wasn't very good for many children. Not many were able to cope, and I'll talk a lot more when I talk about the autistic children. And finally, many parents reported behavioral issues with their children. For the NGOs and the EIPs themselves, many were financially strapped. Some have shut down. Childcare services, I think a very significant number have already shut down. Parents also reported inability to pay for services even if you start back up because so many have lost jobs. Some attempt at remote learning. NACIC also got involved with UNICEF to do this, but it's very limited. Hardly the volume that we can do. Some parents with financial resources managed to get individual therapists to their homes once the things began to be a bit more open. Okay, and finally, of course, there's not enough COVID-19 information to assimilate as a person with disability. There was this media article, a couple of media articles, Malaysia, Kenya, and Channel News Asia, from the autistic community, talking about the same things I've talked about. I won't repeat them, but there was an additional point saying that people who ran businesses, especially for the children with autism, were impacted. They couldn't run that anymore, couldn't run their cafe, or couldn't run that service anymore. And of course, they also reported mask wearing issues for their children. Okay. In my discussion with parents for this talk, I tried to saturate all the different concerns they had, all the different ones. And of course, one of the major concerns people talk to us is behavior. And they reported a lot of aggressive behavior and increased tantrums. There were two reasons for this. One, the child with autism lost this. I'm talking about autism purely here now. The autistic child lost their ability to access their routine, which means they want to go out, they want to go to their center, they're used to their teacher, they lost that. Okay. Or if they had internet connection, they were online. When they lost internet connection, they had another major meltdown as well. This was more difficult for children with poor communication and verbal capacities. Parents all reported excessive screen time became very common. Previously, there was more control. Now they use screen time as a means to deal with the meltdowns. And so screen times became addictive. And this resulted in sleep difficulties in children. And, if you remove the screens, you had again the same meltdowns appearing. The food delivery services that all of us have changed our routines to actually cause overfeeding and in some children, obesity. Of note, a lot of children lost social skills. Some parents reported their children can't queue anymore. When they open up and they go to the supermarket, they don't know how to use a trolley anymore. They don't know how to actually stand in queue with other people, have to relearn many of the social skills that they already learned. Okay. Parents say that, initially they felt trapped and isolated, but many of the ones I talked to then developed new routines for their children. And after some months, they managed to actually have some relief and children develop these new routines. But they all reported that it's very difficult for a child with autism to engage online classes. It's extremely difficult. They need a lot of someone to sit with them, physical prompting. They often were playing with other things. They have multiple tabs open, as Chengi pointed out, and they are somewhere else, not with their teacher. Of course, they may be on the video, but they're not there. And they got unstable network speeds didn't really help. Here's a note from Felina Faisal in one newspaper article where she was quoted. And Felina is well known as the former chairperson of NASUM. And she said, for children, computer time is entertainment time, not looking at the teachers. So how do you expect our children to use this, And you don't give them 2 hours. You maybe do 20 minutes with the parents, tell the parents what to do, and then we do this. And I think one thing we fail to do at this time is using online to do family-centered therapy. And the key online should have been to actually, which autism is to train their parents, who then echo this to their children, which is more likely. So she said more, but I think that's the key point that I want to stress from what she said. Carrying on with the interviews that I did, communication was also a problem with other individuals because online lacked personal touch. The children couldn't really appreciate that quality of communication with their relatives or grandparents who were not physically with them. And strangely, a lot of people commented about this. Children became very comfortable at home after a while. Once the new routines set in, they developed, they adjusted their new routine, and they had difficulty now going back to school. They attempted a lot of distraction when trying to get back to school. So there's this boy that was mentioned to me, who had been trying to get back to school. What he'll do is take his school bag and throw in the neighbor's house to hide his school bag. So hopefully he doesn't have to go to school. Or when he goes to school, he wants to bring all the tables back together again, like how he used to sit with the other children in the past. But currently you are isolated from each other in your individual table. And so he had great difficulty adjusting going back to school. So many children now have to relearn a new routine. And if we start school in the next couple of months, I think this is going to be tremendously difficult for our children to readjust to this, to return to school. So in the end, the two groups of children that I recognize parents were talking about here, always be talking about children with autism here. And one who actually liked being alone, they dealt with lockdowns a lot better. There's another group of children actually who like going out. They enjoy some social contact. They did very poorly and they had more meltdowns than these others. We also recognize that those who were poorer, had less screen access, did better than those who had more money and had more screen access. Okay. Moving on to the adults. Here's the family, the parents and the adults. Sorry, I apologize. These are the adults with autism here, the ones I interviewed and talked to. And many of them say the loss of routine was bad, but the loss of physical meetings impacted them. although we talk about people with autism not wanting social interaction, actually they actually do have a regular social group, the adults, and they miss the physical meetings. They couldn't cope so well with doing it, moving it online. Some became very emotionally labile. They couldn't accept the situation, and then this ended up with adult outbursts at home, which were more difficult for their families to cope with. A couple of the people with autism lost their jobs that I heard about. And this was a major stress because this was their financial earning. Some of them married as well. And so that created problems for them. Some reported that excessive information about the pandemic caused them a lot of confusion. There's so much barrage of information that they couldn't deal with it. And, it caused a lot of confusion. They prefer a fixed amount of information. And finally, I would say that adults with significant autism who are not so verbal will probably have struggles more like children, but the adult autisms who are more able and live their lives independently would have struggled differently, as I described here. What about this talk that Cheng Yi mentioned also about retreat in autism? Some people say, okay, they do better, they can retreat into autism, they're more comfortable that way. Jen Van Houten, I think, made this important comment. There's a vast difference between choosing self-isolation out of preference or being forced into self-isolation out of necessity. And that's what many people have been forced into, isolation out of necessity. So I think, it's not the same. Some people may have been comfortable, but even those, I think, have lost out by not having social interaction. But the majority were not comfortable to retreat from the social interaction they already have. Okay. She has shown you this particular paper with the different themes. I won't go on to it, but I want to say that these are 3 separate teams of 3 different kinds of individuals responding differently to the autism, and from some who handle it better because they were less precious, some who had a deep sense of social loss, and some who had a deterioration of their mental health. Okay. For parents that I interviewed during this for this talk, some parents actually shut down. We have reports of parents who just cut themselves off, who no longer communicate with support groups, who just can't cope anymore. They feel guilty, they can't support their children, they're struggling day to day with their own just financial earnings. They got no time for anyone else, and they couldn't cope. Much of this is due to prior lack of family-centered care. They actually outsourced their care to centers. They've not done very much of this care their own, and so they couldn't know what to do at home, and they were just struggling day to day with their own financial needs, and they felt very guilty. They couldn't send their children anywhere. There's, of course, parents reported a significant increase in stress. There was no escape for them. The difficulty explaining to their children what this new normal is all about. They experienced street disturbance. There was either weight loss, again, depending on which method they used, whether they were depressed and didn't eat less or they binge eat. There was also binge TV watching by some, just trying to escape from everything. And they were very thankful when children could go back to schools and centers. I could almost feel their relief in talking to them. This is great that this is opening up again. A few actually had increased support. There were very few. These are people who never had much support. And because of teletherapy to very remote areas, because of the COVID, they benefited for some specialized help reaching them. But this is not for the majority. Okay. What about mental health? That was social isolation. For mental health, there's very limited local data, and much I'm going to share with you is anecdotal experiences. Okay. Mothers shared to me, and I spoke more to mothers than to fathers, I must say, that fathers fared worse than mothers report. Especially fathers who lost their job were quite embarrassed because quite often the mother had to pick up the earnings and they couldn't cope with them. But fathers had more depression than mothers from what they say. I always felt that women are the strongest species on the planet. I always will believe that, always would have been wished to have a different gender. But I would say there's no respite for most mothers. They've picked up the burden, more burdens than before. And there has been increased domestic violence reported by NGOs and suicide. But I cannot talk about whether this is peculiar to autism or to everyone in the country. This has happened to more parents. They're more conscious of the transient nature of life because of deaths due to COVID. I've always seen parents, as they grow older, increasing with age, worry about what's going to happen to my child if I die, my autistic child if I die. Now this has hastened. This theme came out while I was talking. Some parents become more worried now because they worry that if they die, and quite a number of parents have actually died and left their children to other people to pick up. And with no safety net, no meaningful safety net in our country, this is a concern of parents. No answers for this at all. Here's data from the UNESCO study that's going on right now. It's not complete. You can see that we have a number of total participants there, almost 300 participants. About 11 of them are autism. I'm going to share the opinions only from the autistic group and compare them with the rest. And in terms of the impact of the lockdown on the mental health of people with autism, these are areas where they were more severe than the general disabled audience. Okay, about 1/4 don't want to get out of bed. About almost 50% were stressed or anxious, and more than 30% felt unable to connect with other individuals. Okay, so these are areas that you should think about in the mental health needs. In terms of literature, there has been literature showing increase in aggression and hyperactivity as part of the mental health problems. But this very good study, I will recommend this to you, looking from Belgium, Netherlands, and UK, looking at a very large number of individuals, autistic individuals, and comparing those with autism with no autism. And they showed that everyone had increase in depression, anxiety, but this was greater for adults with autism. Okay, this is looking at mental health of adults with autism and no autism. So I think this is going to be true for our people as well in Malaysia, that depression, anxiety has grown in the whole community, but higher among people with autism, especially those who are adults. Looking back again at the UNESCO study, what were the things that they feared the most that impacted their mental health? The fear of COVID infection. I think that's true for all of us as well. Online learning struggles were a big problem. They couldn't cope. Not able, I was surprised with this, not able to meet physically with friends and relatives. So you obviously can see they do want socializing, and limited time to get outdoors, something that I think many of us also felt as well. Okay. In terms of services, in the UNESCO study, what happened to these individuals, 50% had worsening support, reduced access to services. How effective the services addressing your needs, 25% say less effective, and 37.5% said I did not receive any services during MCO implemented. So I think we know that our service has been very patchy in Malaysia. Some people get, some don't get. And the ones reporting here suggest that the majority were either not effective or not didn't touch them. Okay, there's also this good data from UK looking at a difference between men and women, suggesting that women had more impact on their social life, employment, home life, financial, school, and all the others generally. Okay, and even the local data suggests that suicides were higher in women in Malaysia than men, which is unusual for suicides. I'm coming on now to talk about what we can do as I finish this session. And these are from the dialogue. This is what parents did before I suggest my own suggestions, and they're not too different. Parents said, we made personal time for each other so that we could cope. Very important point, must remember this. This requires a supportive carer, a supportive partner. If you don't have a supportive partner, then you're shouldering the burden as a mother, okay? Frequent connection with others for mutual support was useful, and they said siblings helped. Fantastic, good to hear that, that having siblings often helped. Establishing a strong new home routine was critical, and they planned indoor activities, household chores, fixed timetables, regular yoga, tai chi, physical activities, and of course time to just hang out and relax. They said sometime not to be too rigid, some fun activities, and balance indoor and outdoor activities. Some people said when we couldn't go outdoor, we brought the outdoors indoor, trying to create physical activities indoor. Here's some comments, verbatim comments. It helped a lot that I had a partner who stayed with me and helped me adjust to new normal. This was an adult with autism who had a partner, and that made a lot of difference to him. What I've learned is to maintain the house rule, the new routine at all times, no matter what our situation was. This was to prevent meltdowns in the child. I plunged into baking and got the kids involved, and that was therapeutic. Good to hear that. I always find that working in the kitchen is very therapeutic. As a family with wife and son, We enroll ourselves in virtual exercise classes. We did 1 hour exercise almost daily. We enjoyed the moment, we exercise and relax together. And I think doing things together is critical, not just studying together. We call very frequently our parents to continue to build a family bond virtually. Here's another good comment about maintaining contact with other individuals. Okay. As I said earlier, I'm going to suggest some ideas, but it's no one rule, one thing fits all. We're such different individuals, children and families. So the 5 tips, which are also in the resource document that I share with you, is build your own resilience, have access to a network, support network, keep your daily routine, understand your child, and have fun. Not too different from something Chengi said. Okay. So I think self before child is something that many parents don't realize. You must believe your capacity. When I ran 2 departments, work 11, 12 hours a day, I always kept my capacity. Woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Don't let people catch on me at the wrong times. You got to do that. Otherwise, how do you survive? You cannot survive. You get burnt out. And children are very sensitive to our fears and emotions. So you need to improve your own emotional well-being, or emotional tank, as my wife calls it. Okay. And so you need your own private time. So you need a fixed routine for children to go bed early. Some people suggested a virtual babysitter at times, maybe grandma on the screen while you go and get a bit of a break if your other partner is not helpful or cannot be there. Okay. Of course, a sibling might also be useful, babysitter. I cannot emphasize this enough for building capacity. Sitting in silence, listening to the eternal, it's an extremely meaningful activity. Doing nothing, handphone off, maybe a cup of tea or coffee in your hands, just listening with your heart, not with your brain or your emotions. Huh? And if you don't believe in God, that's fine. Just breathe deeply and sit down there. You could sit in the garden, you could sit somewhere. And I've been doing this for decades. It is the one thing that's seen me through almost all my major crises in life. And it's not meditation, it's a meaningful presence to the eternal. Okay? I recommend this. Solitude and silence are your friends. Access to network is critical. Don't walk this journey alone, as Liverpool people would say to you. So you need people who understand your situation. It could be other parents, it could be professionals, it could be people online. You need to ventilate your frustration. You mustn't be scared to say, I'm in bad shape. You mustn't be scared to say, I'm suicidal. You mustn't be afraid to ask for help, as Ching Yi said. But for us who are on the other side, who don't have a child with autism, we need to be very vigilant. We must spot people. And you don't know how many times on Twitter I've said, hey, I'm here, we need to talk. I don't know that person, but I saw their message and I said, hey, you need to talk. You just private message me and we will have a conversation, because we saw this guy or this person or this lady, melting down, and we want to be there. So we need to be throwing a lifeline to people. Sorry. I find that sometimes a big support group may not work for many people, and one good friend is all you need sometimes. Somebody you can chat with regularly, keep a useful list of organizations, some emergency numbers you need. I would say seriously consider a COVID safety bubble even now, where you can meet. These are 3 or 4 families where you trust they can meet together in one home. Do a rapid antigen test before you meet. Negative, come and meet. All family members are vaccinated. That's a COVID bubble. Everybody vaccinated, children not yet, except for teenagers. Everybody tests before they come, and you're good with each other. If you want to wear a mask when you meet, it's fine. But if you keep testing weekly like this, you will maintain a very, very good safety bubble. Of course, the rest of your life is also quite well secure. You don't go and do crazy things outside. Can't stress enough the daily routine. Structure and discipline enable growth. The word discipline needs to be rethought in our Malaysian public. It's not hitting or beating. It's actually creating a framework for your child to blossom. And routines make children feel secure. They reduce emotional liability. And you need a visual schedule, as Cheng Yi talked about. And you need to get children involved in preparing it. And you need to think of everything: meal times, play times, work times, sleep times, and get your children to sleep before you do. Always 8 o'clock. That's it for children. Okay, not 11 or 12 when you sleep. That's not good at all. And you can work to get this to happen, not immediately, but you may have to work downwards from 11 to 10 to 9 and so on. Having a daily physical activity routine is very critical. If you can't have it outdoors, have it indoors. Stationary skipping or running around or doing something, playing hide and seek, something that gives you physical activity. I do 30 minutes for the last 2 years. I've never been so fit in my life, actually. I've always been physically fit, but now I've been more physically fit than before because of COVID. In that routine, I think you should have planned to have either half or full day of unscheduled, unless you think it damages your child's well-being. If they need a structure, then don't. But it's good to get some lepak time, some free time. Okay, you need some clear boundaries. Avoid screen free for all. You must fix your screen times for your children, because otherwise addiction is clear, and that applies to parents as well. Parents must also limit their screen time. Okay, and I would strongly recommend that half a day or one day, probably this day when you unschedule, you go off your screen. I don't know if any of you go off your screen or not. I go off my screen every day for a certain number of hours. I go off my screen. I wake up at 4 plus, do nothing, and I don't look at my screen until about 7. So a couple of hours every day with no screen. And this is what no screen looks like. No screen, no music, no tablet, no nothing, no electronic games, no TV. Turn off your Wi-Fi. Nobody can access you. You can leave your phone on for emergency phone calls. Silence all your notification. Don't take any pictures. That's a screen. Okay? And just spend time with your family. It could be with nature in your garden. Just listen to each other. Just play a game, do a jigsaw puzzle. Just hang out. I strongly recommend this because it's so powerful to build wellness into you and your family. Okay. Number 4, I think you need to spend time listening to your child's behavior and understand your child. This is attentive listening, as my wife would say it. And, I'm not going to talk more about this. This would take a whole session talking about how we can understand behavior. But if we don't listen to our child's behavior to understand why they are unwell, why they have a meltdown, why they're distressed, we're not going to be able to actually fix that. We need that understanding. Have fun.
We have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. Coming to the end. Have fun. I call it the life of little joys. You must celebrate small things every day. Nature has a profound effect on us. I often use nature because nature is so profound, but it could be many other things that give you small joys. Writing a little bit in a journal, or having cooking your favorite meal, or indulging in a cup of coffee that you normally may not do, or stuff like that. Finally, I'd like to say that the alphabet is changing, and C is for coronavirus, which means some major disaster that we very hard to beat, turning our life upside down and making us hopeless. So A for apple, B for what? B for boy, maybe, or bear, and C for coronavirus. And this comes to my end here. I want to say it's very important to realize that we're just beginning to see the impact of COVID on children with autism and people with disability. We are now entering the mental health pandemic. From the COVID-19 pandemic, we've moved to the mental health pandemic, which will go past the COVID-19 pandemic as well. We're going to have long-term post-traumatic stress disorders, increased suicides, which will reach past our children's childhood into their teenage years. And I think there's going to be a huge, enormous challenge when we restart our services. There's going to be a surge for demand for services, and there can be less services that we have. In case you haven't had a sunrise, this was my sunrise this morning. Lovely, isn't it? Coming through the valleys, there's the main range over there, and this light is coming through the valleys. The gaps are where the light couldn't come through. Now, I want to say that in the document I wrote with Lightin, I talked about the future. If you can't read the document because it's too long, come to page 3, which shows a summary of movement and directions to make right real, to make what our services should look like, and we've charted some of the directions for you. Happy to take some questions now with Chingy. Back to you, Prakash.
Thank you, Dr. Amar. And
Prakash is always Amar, you know that, yeah.
Okay, so we've come to the time for the panel discussion or Q&A session. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, do put them in the chat box, as we will be taking some of the questions that have been put in there earlier. So one of the earlier questions that we have is from Facebook, actually, from Ellen on Facebook. I think referring to Chingy's sharing earlier, talking about the 3 teams, right? The team 1, team 2, and team 3. The question here was, how would you tackle team 2 shortcomings?
Okay, so we have to remind ourselves, the team 2 was about lacking social access, I think, and feeling down because of that. I think we've shared a few things about, I think Amma talked about having the bubble. So I think we have to think out of the box, mindful of the individual health and safety issues each family has to face. At the same time, I think we have to think out of the box and trying to find ways. Remember, you can connect without having to touch. So connection can be, for simplicity online, but we could also go somewhere in the park now that we're able to go outside, and just creating the opportunities again for our children, maybe gradually, because all of a sudden, if they're not used to seeing people and being in a big group, maybe one-on-one and being very selective, choose the playmate or partner carefully before going into it, and maybe prep the child through a social story about what to expect, and provide certain guidelines. Some of our children are very concrete. They may need very concrete things, obvious things like, okay, when we go, stand, 1 arm's length apart, or we will sit here and your friend will sit on the other side. So very, very clear, and maybe making it visual, getting there beforehand to prep the person. I don't know whether I've answered that question. I don't know the background of the person asking it, and so it's hard to really answer, to be personalized in that way.
Chengi, could I add that, even if you can't go out, I find that large Zooms like the one we're having right now are very difficult for people to cope with, but intimate Zooms are possible. So you don't need Zoom, of course. You can use Google Meet or something else. And, enabling the child to meet 1 or 2 other persons online regularly again and again and develop a friendship is another way to also do that. Yes.
Okay. So trying to find ways to maybe go out a little bit more, or have your own safety bubble, or if not physically, then maybe trying to have more intimate Zoom connections. Okay. Another question that we have, which I think Amar, in your sharing just now was kind of covered a little bit, but the question was, would this pandemic lead to more acute issues for autistic children over prolonged lockdown and closure of schools and therapy centers? So I think it's something that you mentioned just now, right? Like we are going to see these things in the near future, and possibly for a prolonged time as well.
Yeah, I think Prakash is going to be also social class based. I think those who have lost jobs, who can't get back their jobs, who live in poverty, if we do not extend sufficient help to them from central government, and of course, I think civil service organizations are also trying, some of these people actually might be pushed to the edge in terms of their own mental coping as adults, and that will then impinge on their children with disability. But I anticipate, just as much as we are going to see in children without disability, in children with disability, we're going to see long-term fears, phobias, because I think for many of us also now, there is a bit of a fear, isn't it? When someone stops me on the street, I back off immediately. I don't want you to get too near to me. I had someone come over to pick a book I written yesterday, and they were cautious of me and I was cautious of them. I mean, all this kind of thing is not going to end suddenly. Mask wearing is going to continue for a while. And by the way, the pandemic is not going to end tomorrow. Our next peak is coming now, and it's going to rise in December, January, February. So that is going to impair school again, because we're going to get another, another huge wave impacting us right now. So yeah, I think it's going to prolong. We're just barely scratching. We need a lot of mental health related preparation right now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And then just to maybe from what you just mentioned there just now, Amar, in thinking about possibly new wave coming up, and maybe possibly more lockdowns, and we talked about school closures just now, and the transitions between virtual learning and back to on-site learning. And Chengi, I think you highlighted, both of you highlighted the need for consistency and structure, right? And trying to establish, and I think at this point of time, we are trying to re-establish so-called the new norms and going back to school physically. Do you guys have any thoughts of how do we prepare, or how could we prepare for that? The possibility of, again, having these lockdowns and school closures when we are trying to now get them back to go back to school and be more comfortable with that idea.
Should I take that first?
Go ahead, Jackie.
I always reflect on myself, and I think as parents, it always starts with us. We are the ones that are modeling and leading. And I think I, in a way, what I do sometimes that's not so good is taking on too much, and then having too many objectives in mind. So I think we need to manage that, and in the view of what is happening around us, the difficulties that we are facing, I think prioritizing what is important first and foremost, and going with that. I think relationships are most important. I know there are many things that we juggle and we want to have, but sometimes when we are so stressed, we don't think about those relationships, and it can all go a little bit pear-shaped from there. Yeah, so I think starting with us and being able to go with the flow. I've been thinking about how do we respond when things change so quickly and so rapidly. So for myself, learning that this is the new normal, change is going to happen very rapidly and I have to respond. So don't plan too many things. Don't take on too many things. Learn to go with the flow for now. And if we can model that to our children as well and journey with them, I think it's a good place to start.
In addition to that, I think, it's easier if you are in a smaller setup or in a private setup. If you're in a private school or international school, I think the thing I would do is get a virtual or preferably a virtual parent meeting with the teachers and plan what we're going to do for the next couple of months, so that we're all on the same page. But in the government type school, it's a lot difficult because if you have to come back to school, you have no hybrid. Some of them have no option to learn online. You have to come back to school. So it's a bit more messy. But if I were in a private setup and in a smaller or homeschool, then first thing I'll do is sit down with all the parents, discuss what we're going to do and anticipate what's coming and actually prepare our children to some degree for what's coming and be prepared to move from both an online to a hybrid to offline and then, face-to-face and then come back again. I think that's the only way we're going to move forward. Secondly, I think if your children are offered a vaccine, take it. We don't like vaccine side effects. I just got my booster this week and I'm still a bit under the weather recovering from the booster. But, we know these vaccines work. The data is good. The problem is giving vaccines to 5 to 11 is going to be a problem. There's a worldwide demand for them. I understand our vaccines are not coming in the first few months even. We have to wait for the new formulation. So it's going to be a bit of a struggle for us for a couple of months while we work through this. So it's not an end just by opening school, because the next wave of opening school. So I think it's very important at this time we sit down and talk to our teachers and plan what we're going to do. This will apply to therapy centers as well.
Right, thank you. So our parents, of course, are leading the way and trying to also manage their emotions, supporting children with the ever-changing and fast-changing times. Of course, working with schools and teachers, as well as the vaccine, right? Okay, another question we have, are there any suggestions for how we may continue to check in or keep in touch or provide support, I guess, for someone that might need more support, but who tends to say that, oh, everything is okay, I'm fine, without maybe being intrusive or imposing on them?
Should I ask the educational psychologist to say something?
Anyone.
I think that there are many different ways we can try to reach somebody who may be paiseh or not used to or just not ready to talk. I say this with a bit of sadness because my daughter's classmate actually took his life. And before that, he said the same things to teachers and friends who tried to reach out to him. It's very tragic. He was only 16. Yeah. So I reflected on that and thought, what are the different ways we can reach out to our young people? First of all, I think we have many, as I showed earlier, the child is surrounded by all the different people around them and the systems around them. So if the child is not reaching out to their parents, there are people outside the family, significant others, friends, peers, and even outside that, teachers and counselors. I think Prakash mentioned earlier that I'm in a child helpline. We've tested situations where there has been emergencies and we've called upon school counselors. Proud to say that school counselors respond and go and help children. Hospitals go and help children too when we call out to them. Yeah, so I think they are a wider network of support and we must reach out. And as Amma has said, we are also eyes that are looking in at the child. So when we see things, we mustn't keep quiet and we must try and find ways. If it's not you, we're not the only people who can reach somebody. And we have to be humble about that. As a parent, sometimes my children don't want to tell me things and it's okay. I like to offer them other people outside the family and hopefully they take, or sometimes I just give them a call and say, could you just call my daughter, and speak to her. Yeah, and I think that's using the resources that God has given us and people that God has put around us. Yeah.
Thanks, Chingy. Chuiki, who asked that question. Chuiki, I think that, what Malaysians tend to do is actually usually quite intrusive. Hey, you okay? Huh? You need some help? I think don't do that with people. We can just, as I said, you just say, hey, if you need that, I'm here available listening. One thing my wife and I have been doing for many decades is offer listening time to people. So people drop by and we listen to them. It's very confidential. Nobody ever hears that you have turned up. And, we hear their pain and their struggles and they know it's a safe place. So I think people need to know they need a safe person, the one they can trust before they open up. I also put together with one of the activists a list of all the people who offer some sort of support, and the list is circulating, and that's an available option. So we've shared that widely online everywhere. So sometimes it's perhaps just offering somebody, here's some people who might be useful to you, something like that, just by the way kind of thing. But if you think more seriously, as Chengi said, then we need to be intervened. We need to intervene. At that point, you need to get some professional help to intervene in the person's life. At that point, we have to be intrusive, sadly. Back to you, Prakash.
So I think some points that you guys mentioned or Chingy mentioned was I think ensuring that there are a social circle or social supports around, whether it's from school, teachers, friends, siblings. We mentioned siblings earlier, and I guess trying to let them know that we are there or these supports are available, but also knowing when that we might need to be more intrusive per se, in getting them the support that they might need. Okay, another question that we got. Chingy, I think you mentioned something about family-centered. You mentioned family-centered therapy just now, right? Which has been quite important. Can you share with us maybe how or what family-centered therapy can look like during the pandemic? Are there any specific models that we can reference or how? Yeah.
One that I am familiar with is something called the Portage or Portage. It's an early service program started in America and it's being used around the world. It's basically a service where allied health personnel, trained personnel will go into the home and work with families personally, set goals, and actually journey with them. So of course, I think maybe in the past, my mom was a nurse before and she tells me in the past, nurses would go into the homes, birth the babies and then follow up and things like that. And I had a bit of that to experience when I was in the UK with my kids. And I think that's the personalized service that, personal touch from another individual who understands, who is trained, and who can help you to make plans and help you to understand, make sense of the challenges that you go through. They take into consideration all the factors that you of your family and not shoving things into your face and this is what you have to do, so it's not impersonal. It is very personalized, trying to meet your needs. So I think that would be the kind of thing that I wish we had over here in Malaysia, or wish we had more of it.
And could I add that that's one of the major themes and movements we recommend for moving forward for services for people with disability, children with disability. that too much of our care has moved to outsource to centers. We believe that families are the best carers and the best therapists for children. And our job as therapists and professionals is to enable them to discover that and to know what to do. Of course, it's a two-way street. Parents must be prepared to want to do that work. And we must then want to actually change the way we work. And as Sheng Yi said, come to the house where we can see the social dynamics and the environment, and then use that environment as a means to enable this child to get the best developmental care. If you read the document that we wrote, Lighten and I, we've given some suggestions how to do it and some links that you could use. But this is the best way to move forward for care, but requires a two-way street, parents and therapists.
Okay. So I guess the family-centered therapy model will include family and parents' involvement quite a bit, and trying to, I guess, empower parents as well, right? To have to be more, I guess, confident in their abilities and what they can do at home to support their children. We have some questions about screen time. So we have one both here on Zoom and on Facebook. I guess this is an interesting question, right? Or maybe a difficult one to answer. On the Zoom, Tricky asked, are there any suggestions for how we may approach the idea of reducing screen time, or maybe being more present for families who might be maybe more resistant to it, especially now that we have been more accustomed to screens, right? Both school, work, and also on Facebook. Mustanse asked if your line of work is one where you have to maybe get activated or be on call at a short notice. How do you have a healthy screen-free period?
Let me take that first, Cheng Yi. Let's talk about me. Okay, now I'm a pediatrician, I'm a consultant, I'm a head of department. I've only just recently retired, so I was on call every day, much of my life actually. Before handphones, there was a pager. So what I did after I had a major burnout in my life, and I moved to this kind of thing where I told the department, and I ran 2 departments. I told them, if you want to reach me after hours, you call me. That means it's important enough for you to pick up the phone and you call me and you wake me up. I don't mind me woken up at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, which I often get. That's not a problem. But if it's not urgent, you just send a message, but I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to look at it when I put on my Wi-Fi. It's going to be sitting there. So people learn to discern. When they needed me to consult urgently for an ill child, they would call me and I accept that. Otherwise, I don't get any messages coming through because my Wi-Fi is off. So from the time I wake up, the time I'm ready to go to look at it. So I get about 2-3 hours protected time of my own before I start picking up. Because the moment I pick up my phone is piranha hour until I finish work, because it's a non-stop thing. So you need to create this space for yourself where you can find your solitude and be with your family and your spouse especially. Now, what about reducing screen time for families already trapped in it? I'd like to say, take one step back. If you are a new parent listening in or young parents, do prevention work. And what's prevention work? 0 to 2, no screens at all. They never see a TV, they never see a handphone, they never see a tablet in their life, which means we as parents got to be the TV. We've got to be the play therapist for them. 2 to 5, they have 1 hour of screen time where parents are sitting down with them and engaging with the screen. And it could be a Discovery Channel thing, or it could be using an art program to draw something, or Sesame Street or something like that. From 5 till about 11, we then teach them how to manage a screen more and give them a bit more time. Maybe on weekends a bit more time. Average day might be 1 to 2 hours. By the time they're 11 or 12, I'll give them a screen. I'll give them their own phone, their own Chromebook, because I expect by that time they know how to manage, they even know how the risks of the internet, and I will still be there for them to talk to whenever they're worried. So that's the kind of discipline and suggestions we have. But it means that parents have to change. So if you're already trapped and people are stuck on the screens, the first thing to do is change yourself. Don't try and change other people. Work to develop your own screen-free times where you are off your screen. Once you can do that, then you can actually create opportunities for other people. And the way to do is don't say, hey, stop using the screen. The way to do it is to create interesting activities which bring people away from their screen and come there. It could be baking in the kitchen. It could be going outdoors on a picnic. It could be many different things that depend on the child. It could be flying a kite. I've seen many parents do different things, and you got to do that regularly. Maybe, as I suggested, one morning a week first, and then gradually letting it creep into being a regular time. Eventually, you want your children to manage their own screens. Chingy, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think COVID has actually forced us to introduce screens much earlier to our children, especially the preschoolers, and created a lot more opportunities for them to be online. So this is something that, I mean, I can totally empathize with parents, as I struggle with it myself daily. I think it's a double-edged sword. So like Amma said, I mean, it is a boundary that, like anything else, teaching boundaries to children. And so as a parent, you start with providing that example and also having that structure around it. So I think there's few things. There's a preparation beforehand, telling the children what are the rules, what is the family rule about screen time. I know some parents, they don't give their children password because screen is only used for specific purposes. So that's another safeguard. And as Amma said, you have to replace it because screen is being used for entertainment, for schooling, for everything now on the online, in the pandemic, social also. So if you want to tackle and you're fighting with your child about screen, you have to replace it and fulfill the needs, those basic human needs of connection and having fun, entertainment, and learning. How do you find ways to replace this? And you're fighting with the screen because the screen is so attractive, colorful, addictive. So you may have to up your game a little bit sometimes, which means you have to think about it and have make the time also, like Amma say, do it together with your child.
Okay, thank you. So I guess in terms of screen time, I think we all need to look at ourselves, okay, I guess, right, as parents, to limit our own and then be able to have our own screen-free time. And then we can try to maybe help and support those children at home. And I think having engaging other activities that they can be, I guess, a pull to, right? Like pull and attracted to replacements that are fun. I think Ahmad just now you mentioned quite a bit about having things that are fun in your daily routine. So I think that is quite important as well to kind of draw them away maybe from too much screen time. We have a question about school or learning per se. So I think maybe towards Chengi, how we've been at online learning and studying at home, and parents might have noticed some learning challenges there during that time. And now that they've gone back to school, you mentioned about having reassessments, and you mentioned about ongoing assessments as well. But what can we do, or what can be done if maybe we don't get any flagging from school, let's say, right? School doesn't highlight any challenges, or there's no word from school about that. What kind of guidelines can parents try to look at or do?
Yeah, I think schools can be very busy sometimes looking at many things, and you're talking about Kebangsaan school, they may not be able to pick up every single thing. So yeah, so we're back to parenting and parents looking out and listening and observing to see whether their child is coping. I would say that sometimes children need a longer runway to adjust. I've also seen teenagers going back to school, and we think that, wow, so they're excited to go back to school, but then when they actually go back to school after a day or two, you see them being disinterested, maybe because the change has been so long. So it may take them time to regain again the momentum of learning, of catching up. And I think school is also trying to get the acts together. I get news feed from the school WhatsApp sometimes, and suddenly there's an exam to assess them and things like that. So I think there's a lot of uncertainties. Give it time, observe, watch. Children, when they don't, when they're falling behind, it will show in their behavior. One of the things is they may, it affects their self-esteem. So they will feel like maybe don't want to go to school, be a bit more reluctant to want to go to school. Are they able to keep up with like homework? Yeah, so are they able to remember homework instructions? and independently doing the homework. Of course, it really depends the age of the child. And I have to say in the last 2 years, because there has been such a lot of starting in school, it is really difficult to say how much of it is deprivation, because children have not learned the skills to be independent. So those who are going into standard 3 have lost 2 years of school. You know, usually the teachers will ease them in standard 1, teaching them the ropes of getting things out of the bag, you know, getting ready for school, all these kind of things. But they have missed all that. They haven't had a chance to practice. Yeah, so I think bringing back some of those basics and just checking that it's really not those things. It is actually a longer term, maybe learning issue, and it will, yeah. And if you're not very sure, talk to the teachers. Yeah, talk to the teachers. Maybe they haven't had the chance to mention, and they may have noticed some things. And you may want to and be friends with their peers, right? I'm very capable, so I always get phone numbers of my children's classmates and things like that, so I can compare, and then they can tell me, oh, today there's homework, or there's got this project and that, so I don't get lost. I know what's going on. So that's also another way of knowing and being able to compare whether your child is keeping up.
Prakasha, besides what Chengi said, something else I'm talking laterally. I'm just thinking of the 5-6-year-olds who have never been to kindergarten because of the pandemic. I wonder how they're going to adjust, you know. Can they actually enter standard 1? Are they ready, you know? I talking to a mother the other day, her child's 2 years old, never met another child yet, born during the pandemic, hasn't gone out. There's a whole bunch of children out there that we don't know how they're going to cope and adjust. And it's not just those going to school, but those who are getting prepared for school, who haven't had the opportunities you and I had to get prepared for standard 1.
I think to like what Chingy mentioned just now, I think this is teachers at this time. I think are going to be have a lot on their hands, right? And maybe for parents, it's trying to be a bit more on the ball or engaging and being aware of what's happening in school, and also maybe observing behaviors or other signs that or indications that the child might be struggling or having difficulties learning or in school. I have a question here. Okay, another question here in the Zoom chat. How similar to what we mentioned just now. Earlier we were talking about going back to school and then possibly preparing for school closure and going back to online school. This question here asks, how can we provide more security and comfort for our children back in school who may feel hesitant about being excited to return to school, right? As they're worried, there will be another lockdown coming up. I think this is quite true because in my experience as well, many of my clients or people that I work with have been quite excited to go back to school. But maybe at the same time they don't want to be too hopeful, right? We talk about having a sense of hope, the importance of building resilience, having a sense of hope. But at the same time, maybe because of the disappointments that they've had across these 2 years, they are not being too hopeful or too optimistic about this. What are your thoughts?
I suggest that we be honest with our children. Don't do the conventional thing we see on television, which I hope parents are not doing. Everything's all right. Don't worry. Everything will be okay. I think that's not helpful at all. Just say, yeah, okay, we are going to go back to school, but we are uncertain. We will try this for now, but things may turn bad, and we may have to stop and come back. So I think the thing that we must assure children is that we are there for them. That despite what this turmoil is going on out there, we as a family are there for them. The teachers are also very, very important people. They also actually know their children in their class very well. The teachers in the disability centers, the EIPs also know their children under their care very well. And they are another oasis of calm for their children. So to assure the children, we are here for you, despite the turmoil that's going on. But that's all I think that we can say. And everybody asked me, I said, yeah, we'll see together we will see this through, the difficulties. But be honest. I think don't lie to children.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's something that we have to embrace together. And earlier I talked about relationship. So working on relationship with your child means that they would be able to trust you with as a safe person that they can talk to about their concerns, and knowing that you're journeying with them. Mommy also don't know, right? What will happen tomorrow to week. It helps them to know that life is actually like that. It's unpredictable, and it's okay because we can journey together. So yeah.
Okay. So I guess honesty and the importance of relationship, right? Relationship between parent and children. Um, I think going back to our discussion that we had earlier, right, about going back to school, Amira in the chat asked, in a situation like this, is it better to maybe have the child to be held back a year to prepare them for the transition from preschool to primary school or whichever transition they're looking at? Should we think about that? Is that something we should consider holding them back a year?
Chengi, I'm going to jump in mainly because you know that I'm very interested in universal design for learning, which we've all been talking about. And I think that is the key. If we have universal design for learning and our teachers understand what that means, then there's no need to hold a child back anywhere. All children can come together, and we allow each child to move at the pace they can, which means the whole classroom idea is changed. We don't teach children the conventional, I'm in the front, I teach you, you absorb, and then you bring it out for an exam kind of idea. No, it's not that. We fragment the class. Different children are going at different speeds. We are no longer a conventional teacher. We are a facilitator to help children learn best. And this means more than one teacher in the class, of course, to support the children means smaller classes. So I think people need to read about universal design for learning. It is the single best teaching method for children with disabilities, for anybody with autism, and also for children without any disability. I was in University of London in 1990 for a year to do my subspecialty, which was largely in many areas like epidemiology and disability and abuse and so on. And we did universal design for learning then. We attended class if we want to attend class, or we broke up and had a chat. Two of us could chabot and go somewhere else and have a chat with another senior consultant, which were doing the same thing that the classroom was doing. And our supervisor accepted that, and he knew the more mature students would learn differently from the ones who need didactic teaching. So I think we need to really help. COVID is an opportunity for us to change our teaching style, because the children are going to come to us in an average classroom, whether it's a disability center, home school, private school, or government school, are going to be very, very mixed right now. In Standard 1, some don't have ABC anymore right now. Some actually, their parents have spent a lot of energy and time with them, and they're doing quite well. Some have private tutors. So it's very important to practice universal design for learning. Very important that this audience here go and read a lot more about what this looks like, and we enable our teacher to deliver this, enable the education department to change to offer this. Sorry, Chengi, to steal yours.
No, not at all. I think everything you said is wonderful. I just wanted to add that actually, as an educator, a parent myself, when you use universal design for learning, you learn so much from it. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of benefit, and our teachers will grow and be better teachers when they use universal design for learning. So I hope that entices people to want to know more about it. Yeah.
Right, yeah, so the universal design of learning, which I guess practices a little bit more flexibility, accessibility, and inclusivity, right? Making sure that regardless of your ability, you have access to your learning. I think we have covered all the questions in the chat box and from Facebook as well. And we have reached the end, I guess, of the time. We've reached our time. So with that, I would like to say thank you to everybody for joining in and for attending today's session. We do have a feedback form for you that Melissa has kindly pasted in the chat box. So do just give us a quick, do click on that and just help us out with that. I also want to say thank you to our two speakers, Chengi and Amar. not just for your sessions, but also for the discussions and answering the questions as well that people have had. Um, so yeah, everybody have a lovely rest of your Sunday. Take care, and we hope to see you all again soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Sometimes, Sukren, the organizer can knock off people who are still lingering there, who may not be listening.
I understand we are about to do that, and maybe we just say again, thank you for all who's still here. We are about to shut the session for the speakers debrief. Thank you again. Melissa, if you could do that as suggested, please. Thank you. We'll give them 1 minute, okay? We're running down. Thank you so much. I've had some feedbacks on direct message, thanking both of you. Prakash also, of course, thought that was